All right. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality, with a heavy lean on the Divine Council worldview. Now, this is not your grandma's Sunday school and not necessarily for the Christian faint of heart. But you better believe that we're going to have takes, and perhaps they won't even suck. Keep in mind that nothing about who we are or what we say makes us experts at all. Anyway, what's happening, fellas?
Hey guys,
What's up, guys?
happy post 4th of July.
Happy
Yes,
America
for
Day.
sure. How did it go? How did America Day go?
Well, I had a great time. Michael Johnson and his wife came visited. Had a surprise visit from Sean. He popped in and then
Oh,
had to bug out a little early. Had some craziness going on at home, so had a little part of the gang. The gang was here. It was good. There's probably about, I don't know, 75 people. So Brian, you've been to one of these. You know how we get a pretty
Yeah,
big group. It was the biggest group we've had. Um, Fireworks never disappoint. So
I was gonna go, but I'm between cars at the moment. So
you got ran over.
he got smushed
between cars in a different sense.
I see.
Oh,
But I was without reliable transportation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No,
How's
yeah.
yours?
bummer. I made a trek on Friday night to the Sequoias, and that's on the east side of California, and they're just gigantic trees. And then we spent the night out there, checked out some trees, saw some sights, and then drove all the way to the west coast, north of San Francisco, to the Redwoods. And then spent a couple of days there on the coast. Went to Eureka and Crescent City, saw a big Paul Bunyan statue and some fun stuff there. And then drove into Eugene, Oregon, where my son is going to compete the next weekend for the U.S. Outdoor Championships. But 4th of July, we got rodeo tickets. So I went to the Eugene Rodeo, the pro circuit. Only two dudes stayed on. Come on, man. And then we had, the bronc rider. One of the dudes got straight up knocked out. A little scary moment, laying there, knocked the cowboy out of his boots, and he laid there motionless, as if he, went 30 seconds with Mike Tyson, and it was a kind of a scary moment.
So maybe
I think
he could have answered some of our questions about the Divine Council, possibly.
he could have. In fact, I thought about taking down there and asking him a cute moment during the fireworks little ceremony. One of the songs they played with them was the Marines hymn. So as you know, Marines stand up. And so there I am, rocking my body at attention, singing at the top of my lungs the Marines hymn. And the family behind me are like, are you a Marine? I was like, yes, I am. Well, thank you for your service, son. I was in the Army. I'm like, oh, awesome. So he did like 30 years in the Army. His family, we had a chat and whatnot. And then kind of the ceremony was almost over. He's like, listen to more songs. He's like, I'm getting a little pissed off. They played your song and not mine. I was like, hey.
That's just kind of how it is.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I mean, my song's better than yours. So
Right.
I look better than you.
Not like he would have stood up and sang his song, or he probably don't even know the words.
Right.
We get all their hand-me-down gear.
Right.
So it's only fair that we get we get cultural ascendancy.
They get all our hand-me-down women, so it's fine.
Word.
Because the chicks dig us and the guys want to be us. Shout out to Kurt.
That's what the recruiter promised me.
Good old Kurt.
Yeah.
I think Kurt's still alive.
You're talking about Staff Sergeant Conklin?
Congleton.
The Punisher?
Congleton, not Conklin.
The Punisher. That's a good title for him.
I always thought he was a cross between Eddie, what's this guy, Billy Idol, and something else. I forget
Dolph
what I said.
Lundgren.
It was something. It was some combination of those two. But yeah.
He looked like Dolph Lundgren.
He was Billy Idol and Gunny Highway, like combined together. The same guy. On his Harley with his tats.
He was a trip.
Yeah, he was certainly something else. Hope he is still alive and well.
Maybe this podcast will reach his. I'm sure if he has any hearing left from all of the Harley riding he's done, sure he doesn't wear ear protection. But yeah. So hey, Brian, last session, which now is almost 3 weeks ago because we had so much life going on between here and there. We ended on we kind of got into a whole lot of stuff right at the end. It kind of got a little. We might have even got a little frantic. I know we were trying to wrap up a point, and I'm not sure how we actually ended that. But you brought up a couple of subtopics, and I wanted to poke on them, not necessarily for, a full session. Maybe it becomes a full session. I don't know. But I was watching this stupid Netflix special. I'm not even gonna deign to give the special any run because I don't want it to anybody to go. I should go watch this also because you don't want to. But
I know you're not talking about Ancient Apocalypse.
I am not talking about Ancient Apocalypse.
Okay.
I'm talking about this terrible drama that happened to be about Gobleki Tepe. But you mentioned it as kind of, and you've mentioned it a couple of times in our chats that we have offline as well as on the show. And you just kind of made an allusion to it or a reference to it. And I didn't get a chance to dig into it mainly because I didn't want to because the show needed to end. But now I'd like to kind of just want to ask you, what the heck were you talking about? What is it that's so? I mean, I know, and I'm sure if anybody listening at home, right? Like I have a functional idea of what it is. I know it's in Turkey, and it's this, ancient thing that was found that, and if I'm not mistaken, is dated somewhere between 9 and 12,000 years BC, which is pretty substantial in of itself, right? But just I didn't know if you had more to say about that, or if that was really it, or was there something that kind of tied that back around to any of our other conversations?
Well, yeah, Gobleki Tepe. I mean, I would recommend anybody who hasn't just go watch Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix with Graham Hancock, and it'll kind of give you the gist of it. I don't think he goes into the Rakat structure of Mauritania, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. But between Gobleki Tepe, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, that step pyramid in Indonesia, I forgot the name of it. There's an underground city in Turkey near Gobleki Tepe that all date to way earlier than what anthropologists regard to be the beginning of civilization. All of this adds up to there being an advanced human civilization long before we thought there was, and they all kind of have this similar lore surrounding them about there being a great flood that wiped out all of humanity. This is all kind of basic knowledge that everybody knows. Every ancient culture has these stories about a flood myth that wiped out most of humanity. Typically, there's some human or group of humans who are righteous in some way, and they get advance warning, but from a god or the gods, and managed to save humanity. And then they kind of survive to restart civilization. And that stuff like Gobleki Tepe, it's pretty new. It had been and by the way, I'm not an expert in any of this. You're better off just watching the documentaries and listening to me. But the basics of it, the thing that interests me is how it. First of all, I think it's adding up to eventually there being a huge paradigm shift for how we understand the human story. The human history and the development of civilization. Like there was a civilization before what we understand to be the beginnings of civilization, but also it ties in with what Gobleki Tepe, I think, was discovered in the 60s, but it wasn't until the mid 90s that archaeologists started to understand that this
what it actually was.
Right. Yeah. That it predates what anybody thought it was, and that it goes back to and these are huge monolithic structures that can't be explained with hand tools or hunter gatherers. There had to have been a large labor force. Had to be
aliens.
There we go.
I guess aliens might have been able to do it. I think
might have.
I don't know anything about aliens, so I don't know what their capabilities are. I can only assume if they exist, they would be able to do that. But if we, it all lines up pretty well with what we know from what we read in the Book of Enoch and how it expands on the Genesis 6 event with the sons of God giving forbidden knowledge to humans, and they apparently they use this to advance civilization beyond what we previously understood, and it all kind of lines up well. And
So let me get this straight. So we scoff at the fact that perhaps aliens were able to give this technology, but we're going to lend credence to watchers or some type of angels or divine beings that came down to help with this civilization building.
well, I why is aliens more plausible than that?
Oh, I don't think either's more. I think
I don't I don't think they are. I think they're same, right? In fact, you could. I mean, isn't an angel technically an alien?
an otherworldly being, right? If you be clinical about what
Extraterrestrial,
alien
I guess.
means, right? It's like a
Right.
non-earthly
Yeah,
thing.
So if
but
we
we
want to,
but
yeah,
we tend to project we tend to whatever our cultural assumptions are, we tend to interpret things through that lens. So people see strange beings using unexplainable technology, they think aliens. I think it could just as easily be Nephilim.
I think part of that is, at least I'll speak for myself, right? Rather than try to put this on other people. I don't think of angels and technology in the same terms, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
I
mean,
think of knowledge, but I don't think of knowledge as being technology. It's almost like we've created this natural word linkage with technology to mean sciency stuff. And sciency stuff can't be the same thing as biblical
supernatural.
stuff, right?
Right.
Because
well,
angels, demons, ghosts, alternate dimensions, that sounds like magic. But
what is magic
technology,
though?
oh, I know, I was getting there actually. I
Yeah,
was going to
Yeah.
go that full
yeah.
circle, right? Because we think of technology as atoms and the periodic table and things you can touch and things you can prove through the scientific method, specifically, right? Using the word in a broader sense, you can use the scientific method to prove disprove. But then at least I tend to think of anything that's non-terrestrial as being magic, right? Like that's that thing, and magic is something that we can't prove. It's something that just is. Um, and I don't know if that's. I mean, maybe that's to the point that you were starting to make, is that our paradigm shift is that we've created two different things that aren't necessarily there, and really those two things are one thing.
Well,
Maybe angels are aliens.
if you
And
read about,
if I could
go
interject
ahead.
there, I think that's a lot of things that turn people away from God altogether. Well, I have the ability to know and prove this thing, therefore it's real. God is magical, mythical storytelling from an ancient land that we have no connection to. And we've been able to reproduce all these things, but we can't with God when we're unable to link, science and God. They don't have to be, exclusive. They
Well,
can be one and the same.
these categories that we have today of natural and then supernatural, they're completely unique to our age, to Western culture. If you look at the development of science, especially the people who developed it, people like Isaac Newton, um, Francis Bacon. Isaac Newton was as much of a sorcerer as he was a scientist. He spent more time, more he wrote more voluminously about alchemy than he did about physics, and a lot of his physics.
Was in search of the alchemy solution, right? He was.
Right. I mean, alchemy was the precursor to chemistry,
Uh-huh.
and I've been reading a lot about John Dee lately, and I kind of I think I might have mentioned him before, but he was Queen Elizabeth's basically her court wizard. Um, he came up with a lot of the navigational technology that enabled the exploration of the New World. A lot of the cartography that made it possible. He came up with that, but his entire life's work was devoted to uncovering the secrets of the universe, and just the concept of science as distinct from magic would have been totally alien to him. He wasn't using the scientific method, but he was seeking the same answers, and eventually the scientific method developed out of his work and those like him. But the idea that there's natural versus supernatural, that's a completely new thing, and that they used to consider mathematics to be a form of magic.
It
And
is. To me, it still is.
It's still, likewise.
Well, in the Middle Ages, you could legit be burned as a sorcerer if you were too into math. If you were like Newton and Leibniz hadn't developed calculus yet, but John Dee had this entire mathematical system he developed, and they're still trying to crack the code on it. Whether it was, he was also a spy for Queen Elizabeth. Little known fact: he used to sign his correspondence. The Protestant Catholic wars were as much political. They were probably more political than religious, but there was all kinds of spycraft and intrigue between nations, divided between the camps of Catholic and Protestant. John Dee was kind of one of the pioneers of spycraft, and he worked for Queen Elizabeth, gathering intelligence. And he used to send her encrypted correspondence that he would sign 007, which is where
Really?
Yeah,
is that where James Bond came from?
Yeah, that's where Ian Fleming got that.
What was the? Is there any? Where did he come up with that? Do we know?
There's a whole system of numbers and occult meaning to it that John Dee assigned, and I couldn't begin to explain it, but that all numbers have mystical significance within occult circles.
So it was a numerology thing?
Yeah. Not exact Hebrew gematria, but it's similar in concept.
Not exact what?
Hebrew gematria.
What is that?
That's Hebrew numerology. It's the specific kind of numerology that was used in Judaism. Like in Matthew's gospel, a good example, when you read the genealogy, and it tells you 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the exile, 14 generations from the exile to the Messiah. Well, the number 14 is David's number because his letters, Daleth, Vav, Daleth in Hebrew, Daleth is the fourth letter, Vav is the sixth letter, and then Daleth again adds up to 14. So the number 14 is David's number. The point of it was this genealogy. And a genealogy was basically your ID back then. They didn't have state-issued IDs with biometrics and photographs. So people used their genealogies to identify them. The point of it was, that's just one example of how gematria is a big deal in the Bible. But anyway, we're kind of going off on a rabbit trail here.
No, it's interesting. It's funny. So I'm gonna make a really funny linkage to what you just said. So the shirt that I'm wearing, for everybody that can't see, is it's a play on the Sons of Anarchy logo, but it says Sons of Popovich, and it's a Reaper holding a basketball, and it says TX instead of MC on it. So I'm wearing this just because I'm super geeked out right now because of a big draft pick that the Spurs have landed. He's showing out, and we're having fun, and blah blah blah.
Feeling really nauseous right now.
Yeah, I know. I did it for you. But there's a funny double linkage here, right? So in the motorcycle community, which I dabble in the very outskirts of, they're very big into this numerology that you were just doing. So the motorcycle clubs will use their letters, and they'll use the numbers. So like the Hells Angels are the 7-1 because it's the seventh letter in the first letter. Number 13 relates to the M for motorcycle. So they use 13 a lot in numerology and patches and things they put on their vests. That's just kind of an interesting thing, but it was only relevant because of the shirt that I'm wearing, relative to what you were talking about, and the fact that that's still around, right? People will use that as kind of just a simple way to identify in a way that's less overt to the commoner kind of thing.
Cool.
You're welcome.
Like
you're welcome, Trey.
You're in the know.
Yeah.
I have I'm wearing a Batman shirt.
I see that. Yeah.
There's no, I don't have any relevance to what we're talking about.
Other than you're dark and brooding and wish that you could go beat up bad guys and be independently wealthy.
Wish I could beat up bad guys.
I mean, shh. Ixnay on the alter ego.
I mean, we didn't want to call you out.
I do wish I was wealthy though.
So Brian, when Ancient Apocalypse came out, lots of articles and reviews just kind of trashed it, right? So I mean, not only like biblical scholars and Christians, but also just scientists and archaeologists were mad. Was it because he's a journalist and not a guy that's submersed into the world that he's kind of dabbling in?
I mean, I think that archaeologists are down on him because he's kind of infringing on their territory, and
right.
But he's, I don't agree with his conclusion that necessarily. I don't know, but
right.
But the questions he raises, I think they're worth asking, and I haven't, personally, I haven't seen any satisfactory response to the, they still, a lot of archaeology as it's been established, it happened at a time when not only was it not married to the hard sciences, but they didn't exist. Like they didn't have LIDAR and carbon-14 dating when the timeline of human history was being written. And these are all kind of, these are kind of set in stone, and people base their careers on investing in them. And so somebody comes along and raises these questions, it's threatening to the status quo. And I think the same thing happens in Christianity. Anytime there's a big institutional commitment to a set of ideas, they die hard, and I think that's why. But there's this saying among Christians, along by that same note, that if it's new in theology, it's wrong, which is technically true, but what they really mean is if it challenges the established institutions, then it's wrong. If it challenges what I've been taught, then it's wrong. But I mean, really, all of this information was totally, it wasn't available for the past 2,000 years. I mean, the Book of Enoch was largely lost to the West until the late 19th, early 20th century, and even then, the handful of people who had copies of it didn't know what to make of it until the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and they discovered in full intact copies of it, and then they started to realize the importance it had in the early church, and that really should kind of revolutionize our understanding of Christianity. But
when I was reading The Unseen Realm, something that really kind of poked out to me was that this is a guy that's a doctor, right? So all of this information has pretty much always been available to him and people like him. So I think that a lot of people have read or viewed or translated original texts and have seen the stuff that he just put into the layman's book, The Unseen Realm, where three jamokes like us could just read it, and I think it gives us a weird glimpse into this academic world that they kind of don't want us in. And I say they as in academics.
Yeah, that's a great point, because even when Heiser has gone into conversations with other academics, right? Like if it wasn't for his PhD and the fact that he is a genuine subject matter expert on both A&E and linguistics, right? that the
Ancient
people.
Near Eastern culture, you mean?
Thank you. I used
Jargon.
a jargon there. Sorry, but yeah, but the fact that he is as legitimately qualified as he is, people still take shots at him, right? And he does a great job
Right.
of defending him. But so I think that, juxtaposed with Dre, your question about, the journalist Graham,
Right.
right? And they just bury him because how dare you wade into this space over here and have an opinion about something that you're not, you're not born into, or you're not washed enough to talk about, which is really interesting. I mean, for everybody listening, when we were kind of kicking the idea of doing this podcast around, Brian specifically was a little reluctant at first, based on the premise, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Brian, but you basically said the words like, who are we? We're not qualified. We don't have degrees. We haven't been to seminary, all those kinds of things. And Dre and I both were like, that's the point. Like, that's literally the point and why we want to do this, because, there's a ton of guys out there that are doing great podcasts that are qualified, right? What's that guy's name? Dr. Ortland, Gavin Ortland. I've been watching him a lot lately. Love that guy on Truth Unites. Or Gavin, if you ever hear this, we'd love to have you on. There's a ton of those guys, Cameron Bertuzzi. I mean, there's a lot of people out
Sure.
there that are qualified to have these conversations. But the hope that we've had is that, we go through these conversations on our own. We've been doing this for the better part of 5-10 years in a chat group, just kind of kicking these ideas around. And I think that's a big, I think there have to be a lot of people out in the ether, hopefully, who's hearing our voices that are like, we'd like to have a more genuine conversation about things, but I don't want to I can't take an 8-year sabbatical and go to the Holy Land and study and climb up on some mountain and bow for 8 hours until they open the doors and let me in, or I freeze, die of frostbite or something. And I did just cross 2 different reference points. I realize there's no freezing mountaintops in the Holy Land, but
Are you comparing Dr. Heiser to Batman?
I was actually going more with like kung fu, but yeah,
Right.
Yeah, if the shoe fits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, even if somebody just hears a segment or even a line, and they either, one, think, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about, or two, that dude's totally full of shit, I'm gonna look it up myself. Maybe I'll exercise my Google fingers and find out. And then I want to jump on comments and tell them how dead wrong they are. Because there's been lots of conversations that we've had that I've Googled just because I was like, oh, you know what, that. And I'm like, actually, Brian. So, yeah.
But there is, I don't know that academics don't want laymen getting involved, but there is kind of a barrier between academia and the mainstream church. They're both sides are kind of wary of each other. Like, academics tend to be more secular minded. They're not. It's not a ministry for them. They're not there to enlighten Christians and empower Christians for ministry. It's more about, the study of their chosen field. And a lot of Christians they're kind of I think they're committed to dogma.
I think the one clarification I'd make is when I use academics, I'm including theologians in my version of academia, right? Because they've gone in advanced degrees in the study of specific theology, directional, things.
Yeah.
So to me, we are collectively not. I mean, despite our assorted educational experiences, both experiential and formal that we have amongst us, none of it is truly, quote, we're not theologians. I didn't go to a Bible school. Brian, you didn't go to seminary, did you?
No.
Right. Trey, no.
I took a couple classes.
Right. I mean, I've studied. Yeah, you take a flight. By the way, guys, full disclosure, I have actually looked at a couple of MA programs, a couple of master's programs with like a heavy, partly because of this podcast, to be really honest. I was thinking about doing a master's. I haven't done my master's, and I keep kind of gravitating towards an MBA just because in my professional world, that's kind of what I do, right? I just don't want to. I can't get excited and motivated to take the courses. But I ran into an MA in philosophy with an emphasis in theology. I was like, ooh, ooh.
Fun fact, when I was an E6, I had dabbled and looked into becoming a Navy chaplain.
Really?
So yeah, I looked into it, and I thought about it really, really hard, and ultimately it didn't happen. But yeah, I've always kind of leaned toward that way, regardless. And even as I was looking to what my major was going to be when I was getting my degree late in life, theology was a thing that was kind of on the table for me.
Uh-huh.
And I decided not to, but I keep leaning, so I may just go back.
I'm sure I regaled you both with the story of the time I almost went to seminary, right?
I don't know that I remember.
Oh, well, I was kind of in a.
Regale again.
Okay, well,
Can you re-regale?
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I was in like kind of a big conflict with the leadership of my church at the time.
That story you told us, yeah.
Right, yeah, and I was through no fault of my own, I was leading the young adults group.
Right.
It came to the senior elders' attention that I was teaching something that conflicted with the church doctrinal statement. My method of teaching, though, was to just go through a book of the Bible, like just chapter by chapter, and discuss what's it mean. None of it was ever, you have to agree with me or get out. It was just, I think it means this, and here are my reasons. And people were free to disagree, and they often did. But anyway, it went up the chain that I held an opinion that was contrary to the church doctrinal statement, and I'll spare you all the details, but they had decreed it a certain way. I was protesting it, and to kind of placate me, they told me they would send me to seminary. So
they could submerge you in their views.
I think
you're going to re-education camp.
Well,
what in the Uyghur is going on here?
Well, maybe I need to tell more of the story, but I don't really want to.
This is funnier this way.
It's boring. Yeah, okay, it's boring.
This is way funnier.
Here's the thing. To the whole thing, their position was, well, look, when you join the church, you sign this doctrinal statement saying that you agree with X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, no, I signed that with an asterisk, and I explained, and I gave my qualifications and why I don't subscribe to that. I would think they would be happy that somebody's giving it thought, and I'm
that you had a point of view, and you weren't just a lemon that was ready to do whatever you were told.
Right, but they just wanted me to kind of sign off on it. But I'm just like, oh no, I don't agree with that. I'm not going to commit to that. But I appreciate this church. I would like to be a member if you'll have me. And they're like, yeah, sure. And so I joined, and I kept getting volunteered for teaching positions. So it's not like I was like demanding to be allowed to teach, or I'm going to take my toys and go home.
Brian's the freaking butler from Little Nicky. Every time they turned around, he was standing there. They're like, oh my God. He's like, can I teach?
I haven't seen that movie, so I don't know the reference, but maybe I'll look it up. And
it's the dude from Transformers.
It's John Turturro.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well,
a lot of movies.
I was trying to speak to Brian's. I was trying to anticipate a movie that Brian would have surely watched that he would understand.
No, I didn't.
Because Do the Right Thing is probably not on his list.
I think I've seen that.
You haven't seen the Transformers series?
No, I've seen the Transformers
series.
The
dude from the government?
Sector 6, yeah.
That
okay.
guy. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
The point of this story was to join the church, you have to sign a doctrinal statement.
Right.
And then if down the line it turns out you had reservations about any given point of doctrine, they say, well, why do you go to this church? Why don't you go to a church that agrees with you?
Right.
Well, there is no church that I agree with 100%. but then if you don't comply, they'll entertain it to a point.
Sure. No, I get it. It's their easy button. They
But
always hold that as a way to.
right.
So
But
that begs a question.
but it's kind of the same thing with seminary. When you go to a seminary, you have to sign a doctrinal statement agreeing. Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah, because I sent away
That's kind of stupid, because how could I know if I agree with what you teach, because I don't know what you teach? That's why I'm going to seminary.
Yeah.
That's like saying I want to go to my local. So I'm in Oklahoma, for those that don't know. So like I said, I want to go to OU, and I want to go to your law school. And they say, well, first you have to say that you agree with how we teach law. Well, if I freaking knew how you taught law,
well, but
I wouldn't need to go to law school.
Matt, I don't know what question you were going with. So I'm kind of curious what you were about to ask Brian with what begs the question.
Doctrinal statements. So I have a couple of personal and second-hand stories about having people sign documents. So just kind of a question for the group, broad question. How do y'all feel about churches that require you to sign something before you join to say, I agree to do or not do? And I'm going to tell you why. So my brother, I'm going to tell a little story about him. He, a long time ago, when we lived in Maryland, he was staying with us. And we were going to this church. And he was going, and he was part of the youth, or the young people's group, whatever. And he wanted to join. And they handed him a piece of paper to sign. And one of the things said that you have to swear that you won't drink alcohol. And
how old was he?
20-ish. The point isn't his age. The point is he had been around some of these people outside of church and knew them to drink alcohol. So it's like, one, I don't know that broadly speaking, not me, but I'll get to my personal opinion. But his point was, one, what do you mean I can't do something? Two, you do, and you do. I seen it, right? Like, and so that's one example. We left the church after I found out about that, because I have a hard line personally with this, but I don't know. I just question the logic behind asking somebody to say, if you're going to be a part of this body, you have to, we're going to be litigious in how we're going to manage or control or
That's how cults work.
Well, but I don't think I don't have a problem with them having a standard of conduct that they expect you to live by, and even a standard of beliefs that they expect, that at least in a general sense. But if it's, well, obviously, if they're not going to hold to it themselves, none of it means anything, and I wouldn't want to be a part of that group anyway. If it's just because what else does it mean anything to them that's defining them? But the issue at my church was. So basically, well, I'll tell you the rest of the story because it's relevant to your question and to my answer to your question. I was summoned to the pastor's office to give an accounting of myself, and that's what I believe. I don't subscribe to that portion of the doctrinal statement. Well, we're gonna put the Bible study on hold until we figure this out, which meant it's gonna end forever, and we're just gonna relegate you to second-class member status. And I counter-proposed, well, instead of ensuring conformity by silencing dissent, how about and the senior elder was the young adult Sunday school teacher while I was doing the weekly Bible study. I proposed, well, why don't you use Sunday morning time to present the church's position, and then give me equal time when you're done to present the biblical position, actually, but I didn't word it that way. And he agreed to this. And meanwhile, I'll send you the notes for the Bible study every week, so there are no surprises. And if you object to anything that I'm going to teach, you can come and say so. You can send a representative to counter what I'm going to say. You can even give me a statement to read on your behalf. Don't listen to Brian; he's a heretic. And you have my word that I'll I'll do that. And so they agreed to this. And so he spent the next like couple months just belaboring the church's position. I just needed one morning. And so when he was finished, I'm like, well, let me know when it's my turn, and I'll present my side. Then he reneged on it and said, well, we're not gonna open the door for false doctrine, and I protested this. Well, that's you agreed to this, and now you're reneging on it. And his response was to invite me to lunch. Um, so I met him for lunch, and that's when he offered to, if I told me that if I wanted to go to seminary, the church would financially support me through that. But he's not gonna open he's not gonna give me a platform to teach false doctrine. But his words were that if I were to debate him or the pastor, I would, and I quote, run circles around him. And so that's why he's not going to do that, because he didn't want to give me the opportunity to prove him wrong. And my response was, well, it's actually super easy to win a debate when you happen to be right. But if that's what you're going to do, I can't fight you on it. That's your prerogative. But I think it's dishonorable. I think it discredits you.
You should have challenged him to single combat in front of the church.
Well, that's basically what had been agreed to.
Or a wizard's duel.
A wizard's duel.
That's essentially what had been agreed to,
right?
Just debate.
Yeah.
But
with that story.
Well, hold on. There's a twist. There's a twist
but wait,
here.
There's more.
There's more.
And now you know the rest of the story.
That rest in peace.
The following Sunday, he announced to everybody that I would no longer be teaching the young adults Bible study. I wasn't there for this. I had a job where I had to work on Sunday, so I had to get time off to
worked
even
on
be there.
Sunday, you sinner.
Yeah, it's
well, that's why you can't teach to kids. You don't even keep the covenants of the Ten Commandments.
These were young adults, but so he announced, and basically none of this was discussed. None of this was discussed.
Right, he just drops it on his own. Yeah.
Right, and then he later on, when I found out and I confronted him about it, he said, "Well, that's what we talked about." And, no, it wasn't. We would have had a totally different discussion if that's what we talked about. But basically, so I resigned my membership because, which I regret. I should have fought him on it. I should have made him kick me out instead of making it easy on him. But to stay there on those terms would have been a tacit endorsement of my own condemnation as a teacher of false doctrine.
Not if you sat in the back and booed him all the time when he said things that you didn't agree with.
And just stand up with it and just listen to me, children in the fifth pew. Be like Joe Pesci. Everything that guy just said is bullshit. I got no more use for this guy.
Drugs? No, I'm not on drugs.
So my issue was, it's not that a church has to agree with me on every point. It's just that if they're gonna relegate you to second-class member status.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, like, I never demanded to teach. I kept getting volunteered for it. They were recognizing, hey, that's his spiritual gift. That's what he should be doing.
Sure.
But we're not going to let him do that if he doesn't agree with us on every point. That's.
I can say that I've never signed any kind of creed or really even subscribed to one because, well, I think one, because I've never actually been a formal member of any church, because I've just been married to a lady that's a member, and I like an honorary member that goes and does activities and does things.
What about your child? What about your childhood?
So as a Jehovah's Witness, I don't think there was a creed. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think you have to abide by any of those things until you're actually baptized. And to them, you can't be baptized until you're an adult because it's a long process. So getting baptized with the J-Dubs is you have to go through a long cycle, and then there's so many hours that you have to pioneer,
like a confirmation for the Catholics kind of deal.
Correct. So mostly there's no children being baptized at all with the J Dubs. It's all very age accountable adults because they've performed all of these tasks. So I imagine my mother probably had to sign something. If she didn't sign something, she lived by whatever creed because she completed all these hours of training to be baptized.
Right.
So and I know she was kind of stressed out about it too because I think she had to take a test and stuff. My mother's not good at testing, and I don't know if it's the same today. This was 1985. Right, so I was too young to really comprehend exactly what was going on.
Sure. You remember Mom being stressed, doing a bunch of church stuff.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the thing is,
I remember my dad wasn't doing it.
He was just like, nah.
You're good, man. You got it. I ain't doing that. My man.
But the problem, like the thing is, you invest that much in joining the organization. You don't want to lose your investment down the line by dissenting because you've already.
Again, go ahead, Dre.
I want to ask you, because if you read the criticisms of the unseen realm, so people that have their anti-take to Dr. Heiser, one of the things that they say is that the Dr. Heiser kind of pits creeds against biblical writings, right? So, and then the guy that I was reading, I think the other day, his criticism was like, yeah, so do anti-Trinitarians, so do Arians, so do all these crazy.
I'm not sure I follow your meaning.
I think I do. So it's actually, let me ask a clarifying question, Dre. This is actually a topic I was just reading about. So the concept of creeds having relevance, if I understand this well, it's the difference between prima scriptura versus sola scriptura thinking, and that it has to be Bible only or Bible first with other things that come along with it. And I think that's basically to be even more simple is how much Heiser leans on things like Enoch for some of his outside, because he talks about how there's a verse, there's the chapter, there's the whole book, then there's all of the other writings by the same author, then there's other writings in the time, and then there's the behavior that was going on in that world at that time. There was the way that everybody saw the world, and you have to have that entire view with all of the nested concentric circles, like a little Russian doll, right? Everything matters. You can't just take something and go, this is what it means. He's like, really? Because I'm pretty sure if you consider this, and this, right? There's a bigger thing to understand.
And really, if you listen to the early Naked Bible podcasts, his whole series on baptism, what he did was he took different creeds as it came to baptism, and he broke them all down and discussed why he believed that wasn't correct. So creeds were kind of a big deal. But then you said something interesting, I think yesterday, Brian, where in our group text, where you believe that the unseen realm or the DCW Divine Council worldview as a whole, Dr. Heiser sees it as an addition to Christianity or mainstream Christianity, where you believe that perhaps it's an alternative to what Christians believe. And that what you said there was interesting to me, and I'd like to get your take on that thought.
I'm itching to answer that, as you know. But just like one last point about the doctrinal statements, to answer Matt's question. I don't have a problem with doctrinal statements. But I think they should always be, provisional. They shouldn't be like absolute. They shouldn't be gateways. The way that they work.
What's the point? Well,
they basically filter people out who don't already think that. And then once you're in, if you defer from it, if you depart from it at all, well, then you don't belong here. You should go somewhere else where they believe what you believe. if you're a member in good standing and you know somebody is a genuine Christian, um, it should always be open to revision. There should, and I don't think you should be able to just kick people out without some kind of due process.
Well, that's the point that I'm
Um,
trying to get at is I grew up Southern Baptist, and the Southern Baptist Convention, you have a letter of membership, right? And it happens when you're saved, right? So when you in the way the Southern Baptists do it, you're either at church camp or you're in church, and you get up during the invitation and you go up and you tell somebody, hey, something's speaking to me right now. I need to talk to somebody. They take you off, you pray, they start explaining things to you, the Roman road, teach you things to think about, blah, blah. You do all these things. And then after that, you sit with a pastor, not necessarily the pastor. You pray, you talk about, what you believe, how you believe it, why you believe it. Then basically they go, hey, you're saved. You get it. This thing has happened. And then they schedule a baptism. And the baptism is just a public profession of faith. It has nothing to do with your salvation. It's something to do to be faithful because Jesus did it. Jesus said to go do it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm super high leveling the Southern Baptist concept, but anybody disagrees, let me know where I got that wrong. Once you do all of that, they put a letter on file that simply says, Matt was saved on this day, baptized on this day, joined the church. He asked to join the church accepted him, he's part of the church. Then you move and you go to a different state and you find a Southern Baptist church, and when the little offering plate comes by, you put your thing in that says, I want to join the church. And then they simply go, where were you a member? And you tell them at church in my old town. And then they call them and go, hey, you have a letter on Matt Moore? They go, yeah. They go, send it to us. And they send the letter. And now you're a member of that church. And that's how Southern Baptists work. And so it's not there's nothing more to it. It's not like you don't sign, like I don't sign a mortgage document and say I'll do all these things or won't do these things. You're just part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and you move your letter from church to church, right? My current church, there is no such thing. There's no membership. You just come. And there's no process, which means there's no process to unmember, right?
Right.
You just show up, and I like it better. It feels more like, I don't want to be too flip with this, but it feels more Christ-like. Where two people join, where two people gather, I'm there. Like why all this litigiousness? To me, it's a Jewish holdup, right? Because everything was so legalistic, right? In the old days, in the old world. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble, but that's kind of my take. I'm not a fan of it because it becomes well, I said you have to believe these 4 things and do these 2 things, and if you don't, wear black shoes on this Sunday and blah blah blah, you can't be a member of the church.
I think you're overstating it, though. I mean, I do think there's a problem with like so many different things are called Christian that aren't. That I do think there should be some uniformity of beliefs that define you, but it shouldn't be, it should be provisional. It should be open to revision. So I don't have a problem with membership as a concept. I have a problem with doctrinal statements. If your doctrine is true, you should be able to persuade people of it once they get in. It shouldn't be a matter of screening out people who don't already think like you do, and then calling foul if they change their thinking or learn new things or signed on with qualifications.
Well, I guess we're kind of saying the same thing. I think, Dre, you started to either interject or disagree.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, personally, any kind of creed, anything that I have to kind of swear an oath to, has been a deterrent for me joining any church at all. Over my lifetime. But then I think I'm like, no, I get it, right? Like you can't have a set of beliefs in your organization and then have somebody challenge those beliefs and have it. I mean, your doctrine should be strong enough that it should be able to withstand scrutiny, but at the same time, like you just can't have people just having the ability or the gift of tongue like Brian has. Maybe you can debate in circles, but it doesn't necessarily make you right. Right? It just means
Right.
you're better at
And
arguing.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of lawyers that win cases because they were better, not because their guy was guilty or not
I
guilty.
agree with that.
So you can see the challenge or the fear that a guy like you, who comes across as knowing his stuff, so much so that they would even assign you to teach youth, and then the youth following you like the Pied Piper of R&B, R. Kelly, and going and doing wild stuff, right? And joining some kind of Brian Irvin cult.
These were young adults, though.
That makes
are the worst.
That makes me think about
that does make a difference. Well, that does make a difference, though. These are adults that we're talking about. These weren't children.
Yeah, but they're still members of a church. So if you start persuading young adults to move away or to not, agree with the creed that's at that member, then why are they members?
Well, but that's not what I was doing, though.
He don't know that. And he wanted to cut that off before. Not that I'm defending this guy. I'm just saying I could see an alternate view or an alternate universe where he could have handled it different. But also, this guy's dangerous.
Well, but the thing is, it wasn't that I was completely transparent. It wasn't that I was whispering in people's ears and trying to lead them astray. This was all out in the open, and this was all, let me present my side, let people decide for themselves, and anything that I'm wrong about, you guys are trained theologians. You can point out where I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but if I'm not wrong, why are you trying to correct me? Shouldn't you be changing the doctrinal statement if you can't refute me in debate? But
sure, I won't disagree with that.
And I wasn't even asking for that. I wasn't even demanding you have to change the doctrinal statement. It was just, don't interfere with me doing what you want me to do as a ministry.
I mean, honestly, I think that you sending him notes before class should have been more than enough.
Absolutely.
Right, and then if he wanted to red pen some of the things that you're about to teach, then fine. Right, and then that's up to you and your integrity whether you want to teach it that way or not. But I think that should have been the end of the discussion. Hey, you're a gifted teacher. Can you please send us a lesson plan? We don't want you leading young men astray. I'll stop. I don't know why it had to be a thing that's really weird.
Yeah,
well, yeah, but anyway, so that was that story. But
yeah.
You asked a question, and I kind of.
So here's a point of order, guys. We're at an hour and a half. Do we want to hold that question? Because something tells me that that's not going to be a 4-minute response and a 10-minute wrap up.
Maybe I could give you the Reader's Digest, and it could be a setup for next week.
Let's do that.
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. Little teaser for the next one, but yeah, Michael Heiser. I just, in the interest of full transparency, I revere the man. I'm not saying any of this to disparage him, but I fundamentally disagree with him on a few things. He largely saw the Divine Council worldview as an add-on to mainstream popular Christianity. I think it's a replacement. I think it's an alternative to it. If you ask your garden variety Christian what it's about, it's about if you accept Jesus into your heart as your personal Lord and Savior, you go to heaven instead of hell as a disembodied spirit or soul when you die. That's not in the Bible anywhere. It doesn't teach that. If you already have that idea that that's what the Bible's about, there is no shortage of passages that will validate that if you bring that idea with you, but they don't actually say that in and of themselves. You're doing eisegesis when you do that, not exegesis. Eisegesis is where you project the meaning onto the text, as opposed to exegesis where you get the meaning out from the text. But instead, it's about physical bodily resurrection to eternal life in this world when Jesus returns, at which point believers will replace the old gods on the divine council and ruling over this world. We basically become the new gods. Not gods in the sense that we're worshipped, that we have religions attached to us, but gods in the sense that we become supernatural beings who rule creation as God originally intended. I think that's a completely different paradigm for a completely different biblical narrative than what we typically understand it to be about. And
So let me poke on that for a quick second.
Okay.
The last part of what you said. Where's the biblical basis for that? Because I'm with you. We the three of us, I think, collectively agree on the Edenic return versus angel wings and going to heaven, right? But what I heard you say right there at the end was essentially humans becoming Elohim.
Well, I wouldn't say humans become Elohim, but we become.
You said supernatural. I mean, if we're gonna simplify Elohim, that's what it means, right?
When you look at how sons of God is used in the Old Testament, it's referring to beings we would call angels now.
Right.
Genesis 6 being the clearest part, and then Psalm 82, I said you were gods, all children, sons of the Most High. Mm-hmm. Then in the New Testament, the creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. It's talking about believers, talking about us.
Why do you think that? Because to me, it's still talking about the Elohim.
Well, do you know the passage?
It's the exact same language. No, I don't. The passage is irrelevant to me because the words are the exact same as the words we were using in the Old Testament that we understand to mean Elohim/angels.
Right. Let me bring up the passage here. It's in Romans 8. Bear with me for just a second. I consider that our present sufferings, this is Romans 8, starting with verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, and hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. That's talking about us. And it accords with all the other passages, like in John's gospel, where it says, anyone who believes in his name becomes a child of God. That's the whole point of Romans, where Paul talks about our adoption as sons. We're heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, because Christ has been, in Matthew 28, before he ascended, Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Because the Son of Man has come into the presence of the Ancient of Days and been given authority, glory, sovereign power. Paul says that we are seated with him in the heavenly realms.
I get that part, but you said a bunch of words, and I asked you a question, and you started citing about 14 different verses, but none of those actually answered a thing of what I asked you.
Okay, so you're asking how am I saying that we're the new sons of God?
I'm asking you, why are you making an interpretation that a phrase that we collect, I'll say we, the three of us, have been very specific in what it means. Because to go back and say all of the anti-DCW folk say that the sons of God means God's chosen people. And we're saying, no, it means the angels, it means the Elohim. But then now in the New Testament, you're saying, oh, that thing that we said only meant angels before now certainly means God's chosen people over here. And to me, that feels wildly inconsistent.
Well, Heiser said the same things. This is all in Unseen Realm and Reversing Herman. I mean, the entire point of the biblical narrative is that the divine council has become corrupt. The sons of God that are pictured in the Old Testament, they're losing their place as the church spreads and retakes the nations. And then when Jesus returns, we rule alongside him. And when Paul talks about how, don't you know that you will judge angels? He's referring to that time when we are on the divine council.
Well, was Adam originally supposed to be that?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I go, right? So Adam was was that first kind of son of God here on earth, and then he lost that inherited ship, right? So we had the whole Bible, and all from that time until now is us regaining that back what he had lost. So it
Right.
makes sense that we would replace Adam.
I get what you guys are saying, and
Sure.
I don't. This what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put myself in the seat or in the perspective of somebody who disagrees with the divine council worldview from the beginning. And so they're saying, no, 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 this means the Sethites, this means the Israelites. Sons of God means people. It just means the holy people, the chosen people. And we're saying, no, 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 no. When it says sons of God, it certainly means angels. It means the divine council. It means the watchers specifically.
Well,
because that's to be more specific, it means the watchers. It doesn't mean all angels, right?
So where is the transition?
Right.
Well,
so I'm saying, so we went from believing that this phrase means angels, specifically watchers, right? And then
I don't think I don't know that it's limited to watchers.
I do. So we can get into that on a different later, but like every angel didn't fall. Every angel wasn't corrupted. Every single Elohim is not bad, right? Only the ones that took women, only the ones that God numbered the nations to, right? Like we have a very specific point of view that says there were these certain angels that Enoch calls watchers that had direct human contact that God made like basically his emissaries. But there's other angels, right?
Sure.
And I'm going to be give me a little bit of latitude here. Gabriel is not a watcher. Michael is not a watcher, right?
I don't know that.
I mean, they have a different role. They were never discussed in the same terms, right?
Well, Michael is called the great prince who protects the people of Israel. So he seems to be among the princes that are ruling the nations, who are called watchers.
I guess maybe, but isn't there a couple of verses in Revelations that talks about the army of angels that comes down with Christ to fight the devil?
Well, the 144,000 were.
Yeah, but those are angels.
No, those are Jews. Those are
no.
The 144,000.
Those are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, then those aren't the ones I'm talking about. Then, well played though.
Well,
but it talks about angels coming at some point. I'm not super Revelations like read, but I know for a fact it talks about angels in Revelations. Unless you're going to tell me all of those Jehovah's Witnesses have become deified between now and then.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus does talk about when he comes in his Father's glory with the angels.
Right.
But to your question about the sons of God, biblically speaking, a son of God is any direct creation by God. Adam was called son of God.
When?
In Luke's genealogy.
Okay, so basically this is fine. So I'm gonna make a point. We've got a disconnect from the language changing from Old to New Testament then, because Adam was never called a son of God in the Old Testament. Every time in the Old Testament, son of God means angel. I mean, I'm saying that as a statement with a question mark at the end of it. I'm happy if there's a verse somewhere where it's used, but I don't believe there is.
There might be. I'm looking that up right now.
Sure.
But
back on the Revelations thing. So there's the 7 angels and the 7 seals and the 7 plagues as an example, right? But my point is simply angels continue to exist at end time. All angels weren't corrupt and falling. So there's something that I'm disconnecting with you there on.
Okay. Well,
and maybe we all need to go do some research and come back and revisit this because
if we look at the entire sweep of the Bible, every time the term "son of God" is used, it isn't limited to the watchers. It's talking about any direct creation of God, which includes Adam. Humans in general are not called sons of God, but we're sons of Adam. but we're
Or
not
sons of man.
right.
Right.
We're not directly created by God until we are regenerated in the Spirit. In John's Gospel, it reads, "He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God." And that's what it means to be born again.
Right, but that's children of God, which is different than sons of God.
It's not. It's just,
Dude, like the words matter that much in the usage. Like I mean, that's the way I see it. And Brian, you do this thing that I made a point of a disagreement, and then you basically, like, I hear your point, and then you said your statement again and made it sound like that's the rule, because you went back and said every time sons of God is said, it means this. I'm saying until you can find a verse in the Old Testament, every time son of God is used, it's referring to an angel. Somebody find a verse where it's not, because I don't think it exists.
okay.
So all of a sudden Paul pops up and starts calling people son of God means something different. We're about to get into a whole different conversation.
So what's the difference between a child of God and a son of God?
It's words. I don't know. I'm not a freaking linguistics major or a PhD in languageology, but I'm telling you there's a difference. What's the difference between daughters of man and son of man?
Gender.
Except son of man means Christ.
Son of man prior to Daniel just meant a human being.
Right, and then all of a sudden one day it means something totally different.
But there's a reason for it.
I'm not disagreeing with your reason, but I'm telling you there's a difference whenever I quote, if I was to quote a verse that said son of man and daughter of man, the difference is not gender.
So I think that the challenge is to define that reason and when it changed and why, so that the critics of the DCW can.
That's all I'm trying to do. Is I'm just trying to look at this thing from a step
Not saying
back,
that we don't
right?
believe, just saying, like, the guy has an argument and it sounds like we don't have an answer. Or you have an answer.
I have an answer.
He's got like you have a Metatron answer. You're telling me because you know so, because you read stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't know how else to persuade you other than pointing out what the Bible says, and that's how it's used throughout the Bible. Every time you find Son of God in the Bible,
it means angel.
That's how it's.
If it's in the Old Testament.
Okay. Do you think that Luke didn't understand the Old Testament?
I 100% would assume that he understood.
Okay, so when he called Adam a son of God, he wasn't calling him an angel.
Unless he is now.
Why would Adam be an angel now?
I don't freaking know. Maybe he's the first of the 144,000.
The 144,000 are not angels.
You just said, literally, the reason I asked you this question is because you said at the end of your first phrasing of the answer to Dre's question was that humans, Christians, those that are saved, God's people, are going to become supernatural beings. And I said, do you mean Elohim? And you're like, well, I don't know if I mean Elohim, but I mean supernatural beings. And I said, well, what's the difference? Because Elohim means not human, it means supernatural being, which is the same thing as angel.
And Elohim is basically a spirit.
Yeah.
When Jesus rose from the dead, he was not. He had a spiritual body, but it was still it was a physical body. What I don't mean. We have this Gnostic dualism that we bring to the Bible that's not native to it, where we read things like a spiritual body, we think non-physical. It's Jesus rose bodily from the dead.
Correct.
That his resurrection is the proof and promise of our resurrection.
Correct.
He was a supernatural being when he rose from the dead. He wasn't bound by the normal constraints of mortality,
as evidenced in rising from the dead bodily.
Right. And he could also appear in a locked room without going through the door, which to me implies that he was
teleporting.
Well, I wouldn't say he was teleporting necessarily, but I again, this is speculative. It doesn't say.
Either that or he's a ninja.
Well, He's
I mean,
extra
I,
dimensional.
I mean, what is teleporting, dude? That's what extra dimensional is.
Yeah, what is that?
You just don't like the word because it sounds comic booky, and I used it to be flip on purpose, but that's what he did.
What?
I'm not being like irreverent to Christ and his.
Imagine living as a three-dimensional person interacting with a two-dimensional world. You can put your finger in at one point in the two-dimensional world and then pull it out and put it in somewhere else. To them, it looks like you teleported, but you're operating in 3 dimensions rather than 2. That's what I think was happening.
It's splitting hairs, dude. I mean, it's teleporting. Teleporting is being in 2 places instantaneously and then moving. You're the dude in the Aha music video.
Okay.
Trying to get out of the book.
I don't agree with that, but it's not worth arguing with you about.
You're Gumpy and Pokey.
I mean, it's the same thing, but like,
okay.
So are you saying that we are not going to be spiritual creatures as well as have a body?
We will have a spiritual body, which means the spiritual aspect is the dominant aspect. Like we're bodies now,
okay.
and we have spirits, but we're still fleshly.
I swear I've heard you say the concept of a spirit is not biblical.
I didn't say that.
You said something
the
very
idea
similar.
of a disembodied spirit, humans as a disembodied spirit going off to some other place in the afterlife.
Like a ghostly thing.
Right. That's not biblical. That you find that all throughout Greco-Roman mythology and in Gnosticism.
I thought I remember you saying something about the concept of the spirit in general, that there's no real biblical subtext for it, or text.
Not me.
Some other pagan I've been talking to.
But it's some other pagan who insists on excluding paganism from the Bible and sticking with what the Bible teaches. But no, the idea of a spirit being like a life force that leaves the body and survive and where you retain your individual consciousness after your body dies, that's not really in the Bible.
That's literally what I just said.
No, it's not. There's distinctions. I mean, you have a spirit. You are a spirit. But the idea of a spirit, a disembodied spirit, that's not biblical. Now, there's this one passage where.
So, where do you go in the meantime while we receive our bodies again?
Lights out.
Well, let me ask you this. The question of where you go presupposes certain things about the spirit, and those things that you're presupposing that I'm saying are not biblical. How much does a spirit weigh?
I don't care.
How much does a woodchuck chuck?
How much? How big is it?
I don't care.
Well, you're asking about its location apart from the body.
Oh,
in order to have location.
What happens to you're saying that you don't become a disembodied spirit. Cool, and I can buy that.
Okay.
So what happens? Do you just what? Are you going to be the same person? Are you going to have the same consciousness when you do receive your body?
Yeah.
Forever and ever, amen?
Yeah, you're going to be raised. But this idea of the spirit leaving the body and going somewhere in the meantime, for a spirit to have location, that presupposes it exists within space. To exist within space,
hang on.
It has to have mass.
Time out.
So it has to stay with the dead corpse?
No, everybody stop. Point of order. So Brian, I can roll the tape back. 5 minutes ago, made a big production about 2-dimension versus 3-dimension, and a finger here and a finger there, and teleport, and you occupy multiple places. And now you're going to try to invoke metaphysical science and talk about the requirement of mass to exist in order to occupy space to live somewhere. You can't have it both
Yeah.
ways, dude.
How are those
Either these
both
things
ways?
exist on multiple realms of reality at once, and the laws
Which
of
would have been a
science,
sensible answer to
Okay.
me.
the
Like
laws of
either
science
realm.
don't exist,
Hold
or
on.
they do. Like we
The
can't do
unseen
both
they
in the
do.
same
Okay,
conversation.
one at a time. One at a time. Matt? What is the contradiction here?
You were talking about when we made the joke about Jesus teleporting.
Right, Jesus, who had been raised bodily from the dead. We're
Right.
talking about what he did in the body.
Right, and he had the supernatural physical body,
Right.
and that he can exist in multiple places because he's in multiple dimensions because he's on a level higher than us. And then now you're going to say, but when it comes to a human dying and their spirit existing or not existing, you're invoking like astrophysics and the fact of weight has to exist and matter has to exist and law of conservation, all this other stuff. Like,
Well, you
either
added a lot there that I didn't say, but
I'm inferring exactly what you were just saying, that weight and mass and volume and all of these things are relevant, but they weren't relevant for Jesus to teleport.
because he rose from the dead, he built his body. He rose bodily from the grave.
Right.
We're talking about being raised bodily from the dead on the one hand, and on the other, what it would be like to be a disembodied spirit, if that even happened.
Right, but my point is you're using like real science to disprove the concept of the disembodied spirit, and that to me, what I'm trying to say is that this is a nonsensical argument to make, because we're either talking about something that exists or doesn't, and science is irrelevant because we're talking about magic. This is a throwback to our early conversation today. I'm not trying to be flip and say it's not real.
But if we're talking about a spirit, that theoretically speaking, let's say we do
Right.
exist as disembodied spirits.
For the sake of an argument, spirits don't exist in the mortal plane. They exist in the Elohim plane. They're not of this earth. They're not terrestrial. So none of our laws of science apply to it if it were to exist. That's what I'm trying to say.
My point is, it's not a physical thing that has physical properties,
Right.
like mass and weight.
Right.
So it doesn't have location within space.
I don't know.
Right?
I just don't understand why you're using those words. You're using science words for a thing that's not science.
Okay, Dre asked where our
does it
spirit
exist?
is when we're dead.
Does it exist when you're dead?
I would say no. But if it did exist,
so
to
it's
ask
just
questions,
in waiting, it's in Sheol? Like what is this? There's been people that have been dead for 12,000 years.
yeah, they're gone.
They're gone? They're not going to be raised?
They're going to be raised.
Dre's asking a very simple question that you're overcomplicating. So let me ask.
I'm not overcomplicating.
You absolutely are overcomplicating.
I'm explaining why the assumptions behind that question don't apply, and so the question is
okay, fine. What's the answer?
There's nothing in the Bible that indicates that the spirit survive, that the individual personality survives the death of the body. That's why resurrection is the promise. That's why that's good news. Because if Christ has not been raised, then the dead are not raised, and if the dead are not raised, then our faith is futile. We're still in our sins. There's no point to the Christian faith. Paul didn't say if Christ has not been raised and there's no resurrection, then at least we have that afterlife in heaven to look forward to as disembodied spirits. No, it's resurrection or nothing, according to Paul, and according to presumably all of the early church. But your question about where the spirit is when the body is dead.
That's not what he asked.
Isn't that what you were asking?
No, he's asking a very simple question. If there's no such thing as a disembodied spirit, so the traditional mainstream garden variety Christian thinks you die the second you take your last breath, poof, you pop out of your body and you magically hit an escalator and you go up and hang out with Bill and Ted and you play music, right? That's what the average. So and we agree that that's not accurate. Dre's simply asking, when an individual dies, what do you think happens to that individual in actuality in the period in between the moment of their death and the instant of Christ's return? That's his question. What does that mean? What does that mean?
What was it like before you were born?
So that's the question, by the way. That's as simple as the question was. So, like, damn.
Well, okay. But what Dre asked was, where does the spirit go? Is that not what you asked?
And your answer could have been, then you don't. You're gone.
Okay. Lots of
Instead
people
of,
who ask that question don't accept that answer because they want to know where the spirit is
okay, but
during that time.
I'm not those people. B, we are not those people.
But they might be
And
listening.
C, but you're you're anticipating questions from people who would ask such a thing. If your answer is they're gone, and perhaps I might follow up with you to elaborate on that, but that would be the extent of that. So you're gone until you're resurrected. That's the answer.
Yeah,
And
that
then
is the answer.
so you just reboot back to so you're resurrected and everything is back. You have all your memories and all of your stuff and things, and you're in your prime, or you're at the point of your
When
death,
you die,
or
like the lights go out,
sure.
your consciousness stops. Your very next conscious experience is going to be resurrection from the dead.
I tend to agree with that. That's exactly how I see it also.
Okay.
It's almost like you nodded off for a second and then you woke up and you're like, whoa.
Just like when you go to sleep and you fall into a deep sleep and then you wake up the next morning.
So those guys went and looking for the Titanic. They didn't implode and then wake up and they blink and like, oh hey Jack, what's up?
They don't know they're dead. They're
next thing you know, they're courtside to Kobe and Gianna's one-on-one game.
I love that meme. For reference, Brian, Kobe's dead.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure you caught the
For
point
the kids
of that.
at home, I don't follow shooty hoops or sports ball.